Hi, I'm Jen, and this is Ed, and we're product managers on the App Ads team at Google. We're really excited to be here today to share some ideas on how you can take your game to the next level. Before we get started, I wanted to take a really quick poll of the room. How many folks in here have a strategy game? Raise your hand. Can't really see. Okay, a couple. Sorry, I'm having trouble seeing with the lights. How many people in here have a casual game? Raise your hands. Okay, all right, so we've got a good amount of casual gamers in the room. Well, that's great. That's actually really helpful to know, and so hopefully this session is useful for everyone. As I think everyone in this room knows, different types of games have different challenges with respect to growth and monetization. Today, we're going to cover off on some of the distinct challenges for strategy games and for casual games, and walk through how to best address them with your user acquisition and monetization strategies. So let's jump right in and talk about strategy games. In talking with strategy game developers, we've identified 3 common challenges with respect to growing these types of games. The first challenge is getting a large enough player base at launch. The second challenge is bursting into the top charts. And the third challenge is attracting more players that pay. Strategy games often require a lot of players playing together to make a game more fun. But it can be difficult to break into a crowded market and drive a large enough active player base right at launch. To help with this, we recommend that you create demand for your pre-released game. Game developers often start thinking about pre-registrations up to several months before an actual game launch, and they can do this in a number of different ways. One way is with the Google Ads pre-registration product, which is currently in beta. Pre-registration ads help drive initial buzz, build awareness, and help you get a built-in pool of engaged players before the game's even live. To get users excited, many marketers will use language like, 2 million already pre-registered, join today. Line Games recently tested Google's pre-registration ads with the launch of their Destiny Child game in the US. They had a couple main goals. They wanted to drive buzz leading up to the game release. They wanted to acquire a sizable user base prior to launch. And they wanted to capture potentially high-value users early on. With Google pre-registration ads, Line Games drove over 10,000 pre-registrations in their 1-week campaign. And they did this at a 50% lower cost per pre-reg than their initial KPI. To top things off, they actually reached number 3 in role-playing games in the Google Play Store one day after launch. Pre-reg ads roll out over the next few quarters for app ads, customers advertising on Android. Talk to your Google account manager to sign up. One way that a lot of people discover new games, myself and a lot of my friends included, is by looking at top charts. However, during game launch, it can be tricky to quickly gain momentum and break into these charts. It's also hard to know exactly how much to bid for an install without any data to set expectations around the value of the user. We have an upcoming product that is just the right thing to help you get as many installs as possible right from day one. And this product is Max Conversions Bidding. With this new burst-style bidding approach, you can maximize initial installs, helping the system learn faster and bring in as much volume as possible during a critical short window. This can also be a great bidding type during short promotion windows, like holiday bursts. Max Conversions Bidding for app campaigns is now available as a beta to select advertisers. So if you're interested, please talk to your Google account manager to sign up. The third and probably most common challenge that we hear from strategy game developers is around attracting more players that pay. Industry data shows that less than 4% of players will ever spend on in-app items. Of that small group of payers, there's often a huge variance in the value of the purchases. Spend within games tends to be extremely top-heavy, with a small set of your payers contributing to the bulk of the in-app purchases. But with more and more gamers getting used to paying for digital content, you really need sophisticated user acquisition tools to help target these users. Shift your mindset from quantity to quality, and make sure you're leveraging actions-based bidding to drive installs by users most likely to complete a purchase within your app. Over the last year, game developers around the world have seen tremendous success with actions-based bidding, and now over 50% of game developer investment with app campaigns leverages this bidding type. In order to run a successful TCPA campaign, it's important to bid on events that are correlated with purchase intent. So that can be things like completing a level, joining a guild, or buying a power-up. One game developer that has seen success with actions-based bidding is Tap for Fun with their Brutal Age game. Tap for Fun was looking to drive high-quality installs, maximize in-app purchases, and overall increase game ROI. They did this by testing app campaigns for actions in markets segmented by different user cohorts. They followed creative best practices and used a healthy mix of video, image, and text assets. And they set competitive TCPAs in each market segment to strengthen machine learning predictions. By optimizing toward the user action that made the most sense for their business, which in this case was making a payment, Tap for Fun drove over 15,000 daily installs across iOS and Android. And they did this, and they saw a 3x increase in their 7-day ROI as compared to targets. Now I'm going to hand it over to Ed, who's going to cover off on some of the challenges that strategy games have with monetization and how to address them.
Awesome. Thanks, Jen. Cool. Hi, everyone. My name is Ed Wang, and I'm a product manager on the AdMob team. So Jen just talked about 3 great tips on how you can grow your strategy game. And I'm going to give you 3 more on things that I think about when I think about monetizing them. So when I go out and I talk to strategy game publishers, the 3 things that I often hear are really challenging is 1, how do you maximize your revenue while keeping a great game experience? 2, how can you make sure you're retaining your non-paying players? And 3, how can you protect your player experience when you introduce ads? So Jen just pointed out a great stat. I always find it surprising, but less than 4% of players spend on IAP. And we've looked at a lot of Google Play data. This is a kind of like a well-known industry trend. Now, if you want to be a mass market game, one of the things that's really important is that you have to be competitive in the user acquisition, right? But you also need to be super competitive in your user monetization. And if 96% of your users aren't paying inside your game, you may need to look to other streams of revenue. There's no one-size-fits-all solution for monetizing all of your games. And ads monetization definitely isn't right for every game. But oftentimes, I look at a game and I realize that they could double or even triple their IAP revenues when they add in ads. And the industry continues to move in this direction. So in the last 12 months, what we've seen is that 34% more games are using IAP and ads to monetize their game. And this goes back to the fact that the industry is just getting more and more competitive. So if you're a game that has a large amount of DAU, but a low ARPDAU, you should definitely consider integrating ads to boost your user LTV. But when we talk to a lot of publishers about introducing ads for the very first time, a lot of them are nervous, right? They want to know what's going to happen to my purchasers. What happens to their retention? How much time do they spend inside the game, post ads, et cetera, et cetera. And we've actually built a product to help you guys feel a little bit more comfortable and address some of these concerns. So that product is called Smart Segmentation, and it's something that we're introducing this week. So if you're using the AdMob platform and your game relies heavily on in-app purchases, you're now going to have access to a feature called Smart Segmentation. And this is going to be available on all of your AdMob interstitial ad units. This feature uses the power of Google machine learning to help you segment your users into 2 groups, people who are likely to make a purchase and people who are unlikely to make a purchase. And what we want you to do with these new segments is we want you to create tailor ads experiences. So to give you an example, up here on this slide, I show 2 different flows. Right? You have a flow for your unlikely purchasers, and what we're recommending is consider inserting interstitial ads in between screen transitions. And then you also have a flow for people who are likely to make a purchase. Now, you can keep your current existing ads-free flow, keep that experience unencumbered, and then try and maximize the IAB conversion rate for that specific set of publishers, or that specific set of users. So for the last 6 months, we've kind of been testing smart segmentation. We ran a great test with a publisher called 16 Tons Entertainment, who builds a game called Emergency HQ. It's a simulation game. And 16 Tons Entertainment basically introduced smart segmentation interstitials into their game. They saw an 8% uplift in ads revenue. They didn't see any negative impact on retention, and they didn't see any negative impact on the overall user experience. So that was a great win. Keep an eye out for smart segmentation, and if you're thinking about experimenting with ads, definitely consider using it. OK, the second challenge. Now, I've played a lot of strategy games in the past that intentionally limit game progression in order to get players to spend, right? And it works, right? This tactic is super effective in increasing your conversion rates, but it's a double-edged sword because it can negatively impact your overall player retention. So for users like me who kind of don't typically spend in games, either because they can't or they won't, right? They might not have credit cards, things like that. We often get discouraged when we play these games and we can't make progression. And ultimately what happens is we end up uninstalling the game because it's not very fun to play. So the real question that we ask ourselves all the time is, like, what can you do in your strategy game to keep players around and make money while you're at it? And the answer is rewarded ads. So rewarded ads are one of the most popular formats in the gaming industry. Hopefully, you guys have seen them by now. And what they are is basically an ad format that gives players in-game items like power-ups or extra lives in exchange for interacting with an ad. And these in-game items obviously work great if you're trying to help players progress a little bit faster inside your game. So this means that with rewarded ads, you can offer players kind of like a semi-premium experience. You can give them a taste of kind of what it's like to actually buy an IAP, and you can earn some ad revenue. And so this is, in my opinion, kind of like a win-win for both your players as well as you. Now, we recently announced a great integration with Google Play. And this integration is going to make rewarded super easy to try out. You can set up your rewarded ads and check your ads performance right from the Play console that you all know and love. And the best part about all of this is that there's no new SDKs. And here's a great example of a publisher, Avidly, who integrated rewarded ads into one of their games. So Avidly put in rewarded ads, and what they saw was that ARPU went up by 40%, user engagement rose by 20%, and overall IAP revenue went up by 18%. They had such great success that Avidly ended up introducing rewarded ads into over 50 of their games, right? And so this just shows you kind of the power of rewarded ads. OK, the last challenge. So we know when it comes to strategy games, you guys have spent tons of money on user acquisition. You've spent hundreds of hours perfecting your game design. And so it's only right that you care a lot about the ads that you put inside your game. The tricky thing here is that most ad networks don't give you any visibility or control into the kinds of ads they're putting in front of your users. The good news is that with AdMob, we give you tools to put you in complete control. So we recently launched the Ad Review Center. And this is a suite of tools in the AdMob front end that let you customize and see what AdMob ads are showing up. And we know that finding a specific ad that has been shown is like finding a needle in a haystack, right? You're generating millions of impressions, and your user reports one bad ad. How do you find it, and how do you take action on it? We've actually invested in technology, and we've built out functionality that lets you actually upload screenshots of your ad, and it then searches through the database of all the impressions that have been shown inside your app. Once you find that ad, you can then take action on it. And so inside Ad Review Center, a couple of the actions that you can take is you can actually block certain game verticals, right? You can block competing apps, and you can even block specific creatives. Okay, so to quickly recap, here's a list of the tips that we just went over. So on the growth side, create demand for your pre-release games with pre-registration ads. Try out maximum conversions to help you rise up in the top charts. And target high-value players with TCPA campaigns. Go for quality instead of just quantity. On the monetization side, consider diversifying your revenue streams. Right? Don't just rely on IAP. Also introduce in-app ads. And consider using smart segmentation if you're nervous about who you're showing the ads to. Use rewarded ads to create semi-premium experiences inside your game and boost your retention of your non-paying users. And lastly, leverage our extensive publisher controls to make sure that you're comfortable with the ads that are showing up inside your game. Cool, so I saw a bunch of hands in the audience about you guys owning casual games. And so on the other end of the spectrum, casual games face a whole different set of unique challenges that are very different from strategy games. And I'm going to hand it back over to Jen to kind of talk to you about how do you turbocharge the growth of casual games.
Thanks, Ed. All right, so casual games tend to have a different set of players than strategy games. And while the pool of players tends to be broader, these players are also typically less likely to pay, and they also have lower LTVs. So with this different user base comes different user acquisition challenges. The first challenge that we've identified is optimizing for the right event. The second challenge is competing with high CPIs. And the third challenge is producing great videos. One of the most common things that we hear when we chat with casual game developers is that it can be really difficult to figure out exactly what event to be optimizing for. By default, most people want to optimize towards a purchase event. But as Ed mentioned, as I mentioned earlier as well, it's such a small subset of your players that are actually going to complete an IAP. So for casual games in particular, it's really important to understand other characteristics of the users who continue to come back to your game. To make sure you're capturing all the different types of users who might be playing your game, consider optimizing for events that are correlated with engagement. The best way to do this with app campaigns is to set up a retention event as the biddable action that you're optimizing against. You might bid for players who reach a certain level, or who return to the game and play in a certain number of days, or maybe even people who spend at least a certain amount of time playing after they make their first app open. Again, not everyone's going to complete an IAP. In fact, 96% of people don't. But there are a ton of other signals and events out there that correlate with engagement, and you can test those with your app campaigns. So as I mentioned earlier, casual games tend to have a much larger player base, but lower CPIs and lower LTVs than other game genres. Because of this, your bid for a purchase event for app campaigns for actions isn't always as competitive as you would like to drive the results that you want. Instead of bidding higher, we really recommend focusing on your creatives. Optimize and differentiate your creatives and focus on their performance. So what does this actually mean more tactically? Well, app campaigns takes a number of different asset types. One is text. We also take in images and videos. Text assets are by far the most commonly used. They require minimal creative services. They have the broadest reach. So text assets actually appear on all properties. I think a lot of people just assume, text, oh, search, right? But that's not the case. Text actually appears also in the Play Store, on YouTube, on AdMob, and it's combined with other assets that are uploaded as well. We really recommend that for text, you use standalone, complete thoughts with clear value propositions. And it's also in your best interest to make sure that you end text assets with punctuation, because these text lines can either stand alone or be combined with other text lines and other asset types as well. For image assets, we recommend using the full slot of up to 20 images. Simple design is generally great, but particularly for gameplay, it becomes important to showcase what's actually going to be in the game. So screenshots of different levels, of different characters, things like that. We're going to touch on video in my next section, but some general best practices that we recommend are making sure that you have a landscape video, a portrait video, and a square video if possible. And we really recommend experimenting with different video lengths. Again, for gaming, it becomes really important to showcase gameplay as well as characters. Choose creative assets that will really resonate with end users and inspire them to install and play once they've seen it in an ad format. Use the asset report to optimize your creatives based on what performs best. The best way to use the asset report is to sort by asset type to compare assets to one another, and then to filter by performance groupings to look for trends in best and low assets. So the third challenge that we often hear is that it can be really difficult to produce great videos. As we all know, creative production can be really costly and time and resource intensive, especially when it comes to creating a video. But video is super important. Video ads on app campaigns drove over 14 billion in-app actions in the last 12 months, and that's an over 800% year-on-year increase. But the good news for everyone is that it's actually okay to be scrappy with your video production. New findings from Google's Unskippable Labs team suggest that for games specifically, many high-performing video assets on YouTube had low-fidelity production values. It's really more important to showcase straight gameplay or the app itself. Some other tips include using energetic music, keeping the framing tight so that users can see what's going on, and keeping the video length between 15 and 30 seconds. It's really not necessary to have a longer video than that. Another tip is to make multiple uses of the same video.
Seriously, who doesn't love cookies? Cookie Jam, the deliciously fun and free game played by millions on Android devices, the iPhone, and the iPad.
Bravo!
Float through bakery islands, match 3 sweets, and create pastries from around the world.
C'est bon?
Play hundreds of levels with your friends. Download now for free on the App Store, Google Play, or on Facebook. Cookie Jam.
Great, so Cookie Jam did a lot of things here that I mentioned earlier. They kept their video short. This was about 30 seconds. They used really energetic music, and hopefully you're all a little bit more awake now. And they also used an energetic voiceover to describe the value proposition of the game. Most importantly, they showcased gameplay so that the end user who sees this video will really understand what they'd be getting if they download and play. This video was also a great example of how we're investing in ways to help you make the most of your creatives. So as you can see here, the original video that was produced was actually a landscape video. But with our autoflip technology, we can help turn your landscape video into a portrait video. And this really helps you to increase your video ad reach. And with that, I'm going to hand it back to Ed, who's going to share tips for monetizing casual games.
All right. Thanks so much, Jen. So when we think about casual game monetization, there's a couple of key differences that we like to keep in mind. So the first one that's pretty obvious is that casual games typically have simpler game mechanics, right? And what that means is that it's just more accessible to a broader base of players. You're going to have higher DAU when it comes to casual games most of the time. But what simpler mechanics also means is that it's slightly harder to create a robust IAP experience, right? You're not going to have as many complex interactions. You're going to have a simpler game economy, et cetera, et cetera. That means that you're going to be more reliant on the ads monetization strategy. So if your game exhibits those types of characteristics, you're going to want to pay attention to the next set of tips. OK, so the 3 challenges that we're going to try and address today. 1, how can you build sustainable ads revenue? 2, how can you easily manage all of your ad networks? And 3, how can you maximize your ads revenue potential? All right, so Jen mentioned earlier that you should consider bidding on events that correlate to user engagement or retention. And one of the reasons why that's so important for casual games is because engagement is directly correlated with impressions. So the more playtime that you have, the more impressions you're going to have, and the more ads revenue you're going to ultimately make. So when publishers actually ask me, well, how can I build sustainable, long-lasting ads revenue? The trick that I always tell them is don't focus just on the ads revenue and the ads metrics like impressions and clicks, right? You actually need to think about the holistic game experience. And really, what you should be focused on is your core user experience metrics, things like day one retention, things like user engagement. If you nail those metrics and you get them absolutely perfect, you're going to generate more ads revenue for longer periods of time. So I'll just take a quick poll in the audience. What do you guys think a good day one retention metric looks like? Does anyone want to shout it out? Give me a number from 0 to 100%. 55%. OK. Pretty good guess. So we actually worked with the Play team to pull data for the top games in the Play Store. And what we saw was that the median day one retention for the top games was 38%, right? Now, you said 55%. The reason why that's a good guess is if you've been following the hyper-casual craze, right, you know that most of the publishers for hyper-casual games require their games to have minimum 50% D1 retention. If they don't hit that bar during the beta period, the game never sees the light of day, and they never end up spending on the user acquisition for it. You don't want to invest in a leaky bucket, right? So if you look at this kind of box and whiskers plot, I think it's called, you can tell that if you're looking for a game that has 50% day one retention, what you're really looking for is a game in the top 10% of top games. OK, so how many of you guys have heard about Firebase? OK, a bunch of you. OK, great. So Firebase is really picking up steam these days. And what it is, if you haven't heard about it, is Firebase is a suite of tools to help you optimize, build, and grow your games. At the heart of Firebase sits analytics. And if you're not already very closely monitoring and tracking your retention metrics, you should definitely think about adding Firebase to your game. So Firebase makes it really, really easy to track all of these core metrics. And you can do all of that automatically just by integrating the Firebase Core SDK. On top of that, AdMob actually has an integration with the Firebase platform. And what it lets you do is it lets you track a whole bunch of additional metrics that are specifically related to ads. Things like your rewarded user percentage, which basically says what % of my users, what % of my DAU actually engages with rewarded ads. These metrics, we think, are actually so important to the ads experience that in the very near future, AdMob is going to begin tracking these metrics for you without any extra SDKs. So keep an eye out for more info on that really soon. OK, so if ads monetization makes up the vast majority of your revenue, then hopefully you're thinking really closely about how you can optimize your fill rates and your eCPMs. How do you get the most out of your setups? Well, one of the most recent industry trends is to begin multi-calling a bunch of networks. And you multi-call with different floor prices. If you're using a third-party platform for mediation, we actually let you call us up to 3 times. And this works best if you're calling AdMob once at the top of your waterfall with a high floor, once in the middle, and then once as a backfill. But in order to make multi-calling really effective, the trick is knowing what floor price to actually set. Now, we've actually built in functionality to help you automatically optimize these floor prices. And it's a functionality that you'll find in the AdMob front end. It's called the eCPM slider. Keep an eye out for that. But if you want to simplify your setup even more, you can actually use the AdMob platform. So we've worked really, really hard to build a mediation platform that's both fair and transparent. And we've actually introduced the ability for you to multi-call other networks on our platform. Multi-calling other networks on the AdMob platform in combination with a feature called Live eCPM is going to help you make the most revenue out of every impression that comes through our platform. And Huckleberry Publishing recently switched over to the AdMob mediation platform. They used some of these tricks, and they've had amazing results so far. So by using live eCPM, they've actually managed to grow their eCPMs by 50%. They boosted their fill rates to 99%, and overall, they made 2x the revenue. So if you're a casual game studio and you're super dependent on ads, think about using some of these tricks. You might see a lot more to be had. One of the things that I'm most excited about, though, is the next evolution of mediation. So if you're using mediation, you know that there's a ton of weakness with it. There's latency, you have to manage a bunch of SDKs, all of this stuff. Over the past year, we've been working on a brand new solution that we're calling open bidding. And unlike mediation, where you're calling networks in a waterfall sequentially, with open bidding, all of your participating networks are bidding on the impression at the same time. And they're competing in a fair auction. What this means is that we're maximizing competition for you. And when competition goes up, publishers win. So this makes sure that you're getting the highest bid across all of your networks. The benefits of open bidding go way beyond having better eCPMs, though. You're able to manage all of your reporting accurately in a single place. You're going to have centralized payments. And you can even reduce the number of SDKs that you need to integrate with open bidding. Here are the 8 partners that we're live with today, and you'll notice we have some really big names up here. We're continuing to obviously work with all of the top ad networks in the market to bring them into our open bidding auction. And we're currently in closed beta. So if you want to test this out, talk to your AdMob account manager or reach out to me, and we'll get you on the whitelist. OK, last tip. So often, I see a lot of publishers rely on a single ad format, right? So they might only be using rewarded, or you might only be using interstitials. And you get really comfortable with that one format. But if you want to maximize your monetization, when you look at AdMob's top publishers, very, very few of them are just relying on one format. They often will diversify their ad format strategy. So I want to walk you through the 4 formats that AdMob offers, and I want to talk to you a little bit about when it makes sense to use which format. So we have 4 formats. We have interstitial ads, we have banner ads, we have rewarded ads, and we have native ads. Interstitial ads are full screen takeovers, right? They take up the full screen. And this format is really, really good for games that have lots of screen transitions. So if you're a hyper-casual game, right, if you've played any of Voodoo's games, you'll see that after short rounds of gameplay, they kind of stack interstitials in between the screen transitions. Now, it's obviously up to you to find what is that right balance between ads being too annoying and the ad load being too high, and what is a good level of monetization. And you can run A/B tests with things like Firebase to help you strike that balance. Banner ads are partial screen takeovers. The most common usage of banners are anchor banners at the bottom of the screen, like the thing that we're showing here in the screenshot. But banner ads don't have to be anchored. So as long as it's a partial screen, you can actually have them float in the middle of your screen through kind of like modal pop-ups and things like that. And what they're really good for is games that have a lot of single screen game time. So one of the types of games that I love the most are idle RPGs. And banner ads work great with idle RPGs because typically you're kind of spending the most of your time on a single activity or a single game screen. Rewarded ads. So rewarded ads, I mentioned it earlier, obviously one of the fastest growing formats for games for a number of reasons. And as I mentioned earlier, rewarded ads are great for games that have progression blockers that you've introduced for IEP conversion boosting. It's also really good for any game that has rich in-game economies, and you're trying to give players kind of like a free trial of your premium experience. And lastly, we have native ads. Native ads are ads where we give you all of the raw assets, like the image, the title, the call to action, and you customize the entire look and feel of those ads. So this format is really great for any of your games where you care a lot about the UX and the design. And it looks very particular. If you want to make your ads also look like they're part of that game, and they have that same UX and design, you can use native ads and you can completely customize the appearance. OK, so here's a list of all the tips that we've kind of covered. On the growth side, make sure you're bidding on events that are correlated with engagement and retention, and you're going to find better users who monetize well with ads. The second thing is optimize your creative performance and use asset reporting to kind of measure and understand what's working and what is not working. Be scrappy with your video production. With Google machine learning and auto-rotate and stuff like that, you don't need to spend a fortune in order to make your video production super impactful. On the monetization side, don't just worry about ad revenue and ad performance. Also think a lot about your core user metrics like day one retention and user engagement. Make sure you're leveraging mediation as well as try out open bidding to help you optimize your eCPM and fill rates. And then lastly, consider diversifying your ad formats. Don't just stick to one ad format. Try out a couple. OK, so that's it. Thanks so much for letting us share some of our newest features and best tips with you. I know it's early in the morning. To learn more about AdMob and to kind of get some hands-on help, we have a booth set up in the Expo Center. Come check it out. And now we'll kind of open it up for any questions that you might have. I think we have a microphone in the center of the room, so if anyone is brave enough to come up and ask a question. No one is brave enough. OK, well, we'll be hanging around stage. Oh, we have one.
Yes.
A new player has entered.
Yeah, let's say global publishers that have more regional-based publishing teams through AdMob, actually specifically with the smart segmenting, are we able to do this on a country-based level for the same game?
Yeah, so let me tell you a little bit about how the model works, and that might help you understand whether or not this is possible. So the model behind smart segmentation, and for you guys that don't remember, smart segmentation is the thing that kind of automatically splits your user base into potentially payers and potentially non-payers. What we're using is we're using a lot of the smarts and the machine learning that we've built on the user acquisition side of the business, but we're applying it to the sell side portion of the business, to the AdMob part. And we're using a model called Similar Users Model. It's a model backed off of TensorFlow. And the way that the Sim Users Model works is we basically take a set of people that we know have made purchases inside your game, right? It's specific, it's a custom-built model for your game. We take people that we know have made purchases. We take people we know who haven't made purchases, and we use that as the training data set. The model kind of is really good at learning at certain patterns of what these players actually look like. So, it can tell, your players all share a certain trend. They're all coming from a certain country, et cetera, et cetera. And the same thing with the non-payers. And then the way that the model works is when you make an ad request, if you don't know anything about the user, we kind of run them through the model. And we ask the model, does this user look more like someone who has spent in your app before? Or does it look like someone who hasn't spent in your app? Now, country is one of those features that's built inside the model. And so it should work regionally. There's really no reason why it wouldn't, if that makes sense.
So, technically, I can, let's say, if I want to create a proof of concept, I can limit it to country A, run a test, and then see if we roll it out. Okay.
Absolutely. That's right.
Hi, thanks for the talk and information. I was curious if any of this will work being able to segment out children with ads right now. I happen to have two and notice quite often with Google Play Store and in my own games that they'll be shown explicit ads or other things that I don't want them to see in a casual play game.
Yeah.
So is there anything where we as developers can actually exclude based off age?
Absolutely, absolutely. So this has become one of the hottest topics in the advertising industry. AdMob actually offers a suite of controls that you can use to again, customize ad content based on the age level of a player. I'm not the product manager of the age control stuff, but we definitely have a lot of documentation on the product site. And through our SDKs with different flags and levers, you can absolutely kind of tailor your ads content based on the age.
Thank you.
Cool.
Hi, I have a question about pre-registration campaigns. Basically, my question is, what's the best time to launch them? How far in advance, how ahead in advance before the launch of the game? Because my concern is pre-registrations are cool, but what's the conversion rate? In our portfolio, we have 2 games for which we didn't launch pre-registration campaigns, and conversion rate in Google Play console was 17% both time, and we varied pre-launch date distance from the launch, and yet the percentage was the same. Now we have 3rd game in pre-registrations mode. It gathered already more pre-registrations. Total number of pre-registrations, of organic pre-registrations, is already more, twice than the game we had in advance. So my question is when to launch these campaigns, and whether the conversion rate would be better or worse than the organic ones.
So I think it really depends on the developer, the game, and even the market. So in APAC, where we see pre-registrations being really popular, we've heard of game developers saying like 3 months in advance, I have my microsite up, like I'm already doing all this stuff to try and drive pre-reg, and they do it in a lot of different ways that are not Google Ads, right? They do it through like chat and all these other different things. So I mean, like it really depends. One feature that our beta doesn't have right now is actually the ability to calculate the number of conversions that come because of the pre-registration campaign. So the next version of the beta will have that, and so that'll be a little bit more helpful when you're testing these things out, to be able to say like, okay, you know, maybe I want to test for this game a pre-registration of like 3 months in advance, and this other one I want to do like 3 weeks in advance, right? So you can actually attribute that back to the campaign itself.
That's cool, thanks.
Awesome. If there are no other questions, we're still going to stick around, but we would really love it if you could take a quick survey for us and let us know how we did. If you have any feedback on either the UAC stuff that Jen talked about or the AdMob stuff, we would love to hear it. Cool, thanks everyone.
Thanks.